Nice to finally talk to you. I've seen much of you. I think you've seen a fair bit of our magazine. I've seen you very kindly read out some of our tweets and articles before.
Yeah,
But
I have we not done an interview before? I feel like we've corresponded in the past.
I think it's been discussed. I think it's never come to fruition. I know you feel like someone I've met, but I don't think we've ever actually met. I think I've
I'm
just seen enough
almost
of your
certain.
videos.
I
And
don't
you've
know.
just read enough.
I can't remember. I cannot remember right now, but I am almost certain. Hold on, let me fix this camera angle a little bit.
I'm sorry if I've forgotten our
Yeah, you're a busy
memorable
guy.
previous.
You're too busy being right all the time with your early calls on John Fetterman.
Oh, that guy, that asshole. Did you see his I'm just writing an article tonight about his former chief of staff, Gentleson,
Oh
who's
yeah.
just started this think tank. And I don't know if you looked at the first paper their think tank put out was on climate change. And it said, how can Democrats talk better about climate change? And their recommendation is stop talking about climate change.
Well, I think the Democratic Party really needs to drop more issues. If they just become more like Republicans, obviously, eventually one of these elections, like they'll trick the Republicans into voting for them, and then they can just be Republicans.
You say that sarcastically, Hasan Piker, or you sound like you're saying it sarcastically.
No,
but,
no, I'm actually
that-
dropping my career as a successful podcaster to become a Democrat Party analyst.
That genuinely seems to be the approach of this think tank, of there's the Abundance Institute now, and they seem to have converged on these ideas. Now, let me just introduce you for people for people like my parents who don't know who you are. I mean, most people will probably. Hasan Piker is one of the most popular political streamers in the world. He is about to hit, I think probably within a month or two, 3 million followers on Twitch. He has done interviews before with people like Bernie Sanders, AOC, Rashida Tlaib, friend of the magazine Abdul El Sayed. You may have seen his op-ed in the New York Times recently. I was supposed to debate Charlie Kirk. Here's what I would have said. You may also have seen his speech at the People's Conference for Palestine, or you may have seen, he's also the guy that journalists go to when they want to answer the question, how do we speak to the young men? And so you may have seen his profile in GQ. Hasan Piker thinks America might be cooked. Hasan Piker, they have some weird titles, these. Hasan Piker, a progressive mind in a MAGA body in the New York Times, and Hasan Piker, himbo gateway drug for progressives, NPR. How do you feel about the various monikers that have been applied to you?
Fantastic. What's really interesting about it is that the media will come to me in the aftermath of elections for an autopsy, and then they just like avoid listening to anything I have to say.
But I feel like the things that you do say, I hear you go on like Pod Save America, and they go, Hasan Piker, tell us why we lost, and you go, well, it's because you're not speaking to the things that normal people want out of their politicians.
Yeah. And then they immediately go, yeah, that's not it. And we saw a version of that with Zohran too, because like I'm eternally grateful for Zohran Mamdani, not because he too is a 34-year-old Muslim socialist, but also because every single thing that I said leading up to the election about all of the issues that the Democrats were facing in terms of like their inability to address these material harms that people were experiencing, cost of living crisis, and their willingness to compromise on a lot of these issues instead of like fighting and instead of like developing a sophisticated counter messaging operation around like immigration and numerous other problems that the Republicans were highlighting. That all came to be the reality. That was the reason why Kamala Harris lost, right? Which, if you ask Kamala Harris, she has 107 different reasons apparently. But at the time, in the aftermath of the election, they were like, okay, you said a lot of these things. Many of them came true. What do you think is the problem with like, the young men becoming MAGA? And I kept repeating these things over and over again to people, but now it's much easier, so I can just like point to Zohran and be like, well, there's a guy who's doing it. Like that's proof. That's like proof of concept right there. And yet I have noticed that the media overall still very much refuse to reckon with that, and will still say, oh no, it's because he's handsome. or he does good social media. And then they try to redo the Zohran thing, but for like centrist politicians, and it's just going to be a demonstrable failure.
Yes, you see, actually, a lot of them directly imitating Mamdani's video style, but without the policies, seeing if you can run that. As you say, it is a kind of proof of concept because, we talked to Mamdani pretty early on when he was, considered to have absolutely no chance. And I said to him, how are you going to, as a democratic socialist, appeal to New Yorkers? And he said, relentless he said the same thing he told every single person who asked, relentless focus on affordability. And then if you ask the people who supported him, they will not say, I supported him because of his nice smile. They say, like, I can't afford to live in this city.
Well, don't you know those people don't know what's good for them? They only voted for him because of his nice smile, actually. It's because Andrew Cuomo had a bad smile. That's why he lost.
Well, and people say the same thing about you, Hasan. They say people there was all these profiles I noticed in the thing. They were like, well, he has. I think was it the New York Times profile that was all like, well, people like a handsome man.
That's yeah.
And I was like, well, that's true. But I was watching your speech at the Palestine conference, and one of the things I was struck by there was that you were giving the audience there, your message was like relentless, like life is difficult, this is hard, but we have to keep pushing, we have to hope.
It's easy to feel powerless in the face of such tremendous cruelty. I totally understand how some people want to tap out every now and then. But you must never succumb to nihilism. You must always maintain revolutionary optimism. You must always continue to organize. You must always continue to agitate. Because the quicker we can create enough insurmountable pressure that causes the American state to recalculate its double suicide pact with Israel, the quicker we can save as many Palestinian lives as possible. We do it for those who have been martyred, and we do it for those who still remain.
If I was going to watch you for a long time, it would in part be because of that giving of meaning and hope. And I'm sure you think that that's a big part of why you've managed to attract, so many people.
I think so too, because there's a lot of hotties out there, like a lot better looking than myself, I would say. And I don't think many people are tuning in for their political opinions with regular frequency. So I do suspect it might have something to do with the content. But I take it with grace. It's not terrible. My haters and my lovers alike, when they write these profiles, they'll talk about my looks, and I guess that is a part of it. Having said that, I think the way that I see it, I look at a lot of these media hits as terrorism insurance. I jokingly call it, terrorism and anti-Semitism insurance, because not a secret that the ADL has been after me for the past 2 years now. And viciously smearing me and trying to actively deplatform me for my anti-Zionist, my committed anti-Zionist stance. And I think a lot of these articles are written by like-minded reporters, like-minded journalists that can make their way through the editorial censors without actually pointing to the policies or the ideals that I represent, but simply still saying we see it. It's almost like a nod. It's almost like we want to give this guy some positive coverage, but we can't do it over the contents of what he's talking about. So we'll just talk about it from an entry point that is more liberal facing. So it's good. It's ultimately great. I'd much rather have the New York Times write about me in that way than the million other Fox News articles that come out every other week about how I'm somehow responsible for 9/11 or whatever they've cooked up.
I mean, you said terrorism insurance. People who are not familiar, might think that was rather extreme. But we just talked to yesterday members of the Gaza, the Samud flotilla, who were talking about how, their peaceful flotilla, Israel has escalated its description of them as they've gone from talking about them as the selfie cruise to talking talking about them as a terrorist flotilla.
As you know, most of my background, my social background in my life are Zionists. And for the first couple of weeks, I was getting lots of texts of, "Oh, I hope you're enjoying your cruise with Greta on the selfie boat." And, those texts have died down recently because I think they see that the Hasbro has changed. Now it's now we're the terror boat, and they're not sure what to say to me anymore because they know I'm not a terrorist.
And we know that the United States and Israel have both been pushing the boundaries consistently of, Trump's strike on the Venezuelan boat, just trying to figure out how much violence they can get away with without being punished for it. So, I mean, your op-ed in the New York Times was about the American culture of violence around Charlie Kirk. You get a lot of death threats. I mean, it's fun. These profiles make it seem fun, but we're living in very frightening times.
Yeah. I mean, there's two different forms that I'm worried about. You got the decentralized adventurists that have a false sense of vengeance, that might want to take matters in their own hands, which is always an imminent threat. But then you also have the government prosecution, no matter how illegal it may seem right now, given the First Amendment. It's very obvious that the administration is taking the initiative. And I mean, the executive order that came down yesterday that designated Antifa as a terrorist organization, a domestic terrorist organization, which has never happened before, not for the Klan, not for the Three Percenters, the Oath Keepers, the Proud Boys, or any other group in this country that is far right and much more organized. But instead, this vague definition of Antifa, which is simply an action. It's not an organized unit whatsoever. It's just an action that people take against fascism. And I suspect that they are going to be very aggressive in their pursuit of combating any sort of political dissent and eroding the First Amendment, as they started under the Biden administration and certainly continue along in the Trump administration with pro-Palestinian activists on college campuses.
Well, and what we saw during the recent Kimmel thing was how easily private corporations can be intimidated by the government into deplatforming people just with a phone call or a word. I know, you stream on Twitch. You've had suspensions before. I was struck by. Am I right that you got a suspension for reading a terrorist manifesto while denouncing it? Was that it?
Yeah.
Was that?
So I have read manifestos of all the shooters and acts of domestic terror in general, because a big part of what I do is to try to combat the misinformation environment that is immediately built in the aftermath of high-profile incidents like this, whether it be a school shooting or a mass shooting. And I think one of the best ways to arrive at the ideological profile of a shooter or a domestic terrorist or any sort of suspect whatsoever and understand their motivations is by looking at their manifestos. And in the past, I've never been punished for this, but it is a terms of service violation technically. That is a part of their TOS. I don't agree with it, but it's a part of their terms of service regardless. But the first time it was ever used against me was in the aftermath of the Israeli embassy staffers that were shot, and I went through the manifesto that Ken Klippenstein had actually released to get a better understanding of what the motivations were here, and that was the first time I got a suspension for doing that, even though I'd read many profiles and many manifestos in the past.
And I'm trying to think how to approach this delicately and carefully, but it is true that when you read the words of those people who are official enemies, without agreeing with or even sympathizing with their acts, whether it be October 7th, whether it be reading the words of Osama bin Laden, it is true that when you read their explanations for their actions, it at the very least humanizes them. And that is dangerous to the ideology that says we just have to exterminate them. We had, Osama bin Laden's letter to America went viral on TikTok a couple of years ago. And the reason it did, I don't think because people concluded that Osama bin Laden was right to carry out terrorism, but because he explained his grievance against the United States, and it was rooted in U.S. foreign policy and not a hatred of our freedoms. Dropsite News has been publishing a lot of interviews with Hamas, and when you listen to the people from Hamas, they certainly seem human. They seem, again, not to justify, just to reiterate, not to justify the October 7th attack, but certainly to say that America's enemies are human beings as well, and that is a dangerous idea.
Yeah, it's not only that, but also I think the media environment of omitting any sort of like rationale behind like designated state enemies is the reason why when people do actually find out about whatever the rationale was behind Osama bin Laden, for example, to go, oh my God, I can't believe this person was just like this. This person also had a logical through line between his opinion and the actions that he committed, no matter how heinous, no matter how atrocious they may be. And I think it's important to understand that, especially if the goal here is to end violence in general, even if it's retaliatory violence. And I think the censorship structure designed around this is done so in a way to, I guess, I don't know if it's a sincere effort to stop the potential humanization of like a shooter or a bad actor or anything like that, but more so I think it's done to correspond to State Department interests. And obviously not, these things are not always the same. And in most circumstances, I think it's up to us as adults to assess through it, to parse through those words and to explain what the rationale is, and then talk about why it's silly or ridiculous, especially when compared to the heinous acts of violence that are committed. This is what you described with Hamas's rationale, for example, is a perfect demonstration of this censorship regime. Because a big part of the reason why most Americans are completely oblivious to the many years of Palestinian liberation struggle is a direct consequence of this, where there's no time spent on those who take up arms against the Israeli violence that has been committed against Palestinians for almost 100 years at this point, and certainly officially for the past 80. And because of that, they will go along with the official narrative, which is they are anti-Semitic animals, they're barbarians, they're monsters, and they just wanted to behead Jewish babies or something. And they're just like, they have deep anti-Semitic genes in them, as Joe Biden once famously said. This is untrue. This is completely untrue. And I think that a lot of people are fearful of making the might is right argument openly in liberal society, because it doesn't correspond to the way that liberals have presented themselves, the way that liberals have identified themselves as like peace-loving people that are interested in human rights and whatnot. And therefore, the easiest way to deal with that is to simply shut off the communications of the other side that needs to be in a permanent state of perfect victimhood. And even then, we still don't listen to their plight.
And for saying things like this, Hasan, you had at one point, about a year ago, I think, a Democratic member of Congress, Richie Torres, who wrote to the chief executive of Twitch, your platform, and said, "You're platforming an anti-Semite. You need to purge anti-Semitism from your platform. You need to take his living away and make sure that nobody hears what." Even though as I understand it, every single time you have ever mentioned anti-Semitism, you have explicitly denounced anti-Semitism.
I've been someone who has combated anti-Semitism for my entire professional media career, and also have been a committed anti-Zionist that entire time as well. But I think that is the reason why I am seen as like a more prominent critic, a more dangerous critic in the eyes of like the ADL or the Israel's very own attack dog, Richie Torres, for that reason, because obviously someone like Nick Fuentes is incapable of changing the hearts and minds of young American Jews, who will obviously listen to what he has to say, hear that he denies the Holocaust, recognize that he's a fascist, and go, oh, this person hates Israel because he's anti-Semitic. In many ways, someone like Nick Fuentes being a prominent critic of Israel is actually quite appealing to the interests of Zionism in this country, because you can always present critics of Israel as anti-Semitic and then point to guys like him. But when you point to someone like myself, who has actively fought back against anti-Semitism and also argues against Israel and argues against Zionism from an empathetic point of view, empathetic to the plight and the struggle of the Palestinian population as an anti-fascist, all of a sudden that's a lot more complicated. Liberals are obviously a lot more open-minded to the way I argue about this issue, because it's a more honest. It's a more honest assessment of the situation.
Hope you're enjoying this interview. If you want to listen to full-length Current Affairs interviews before they are made fully available to the public, please visit our Patreon page at patreon.com/currentaffairs and become a supporter today.